Hello, I'm Jez, and I'm lots of things, and I've kind of been thinking about this conference and going, you start your talk with a big thing about who you are and what you do, and actually that's really boring and it's not particularly interesting. If you're interested in that, Google me. My name's very distinctive, you can find out who I am. But what's kind of relevance for this talk is that I kind of last year really wrote this book. And I wrote this book because I was doing a master's at the time where I kind of got to study Agile for 2 years, which was a real privilege, basically. And I was looking at Agile in the context of marketing, and I was having to write my final thesis on that. And writing a final thesis is really, really boring and really difficult. And you have to reference everything and footnote everything and justify everything you say. And I thought it'd be far more fun to write a book. So I wrote a book instead and then turned the book into a thesis. So I've got a bunch of copies of it. I've moved house recently and I feel the ghost of Taiichi Ohno, the guy who kind of invented Lean, looking down at me going, you've got waste sitting in your house, you've got overproduced inventory and you need to get rid of that. So please help me get rid of it by coming and taking a copy of the book at the end if you want. So yeah, I'm going to talk about Agile marketing, and Agile marketing is actually a bit of a buzz thing in the world of marketing and advertising at the moment. People in marketing are talking about it, but they really don't understand what it is. They don't have kind of any conception of Agile really. And for most people, they think it's this. This is kind of the tweet that started it all back in 2013 during the Super Bowl in America. Super Bowl obviously is a huge thing, huge marketing opportunity, huge advertising budgets behind it. And there was a power cut during the Super Bowl. And Oreos, within half an hour of the power cut, I think maybe even 20 minutes of the power cut, came out with this tweet, which was timely and relevant and contextual and all that sort of fantastic stuff. And everyone in marketing and advertising kind of wet themselves over it and said, this is the most amazing that's ever happened. It's incredibly agile. Because Agile's just about being quick, isn't it? It's about doing stuff more quickly and that. And I actually now really dislike this tweet, because this tweet's kind of made everyone think that that's all Agile is. It's about tweeting something about cookies very quickly when there's a power cut, or there was this other one that happened last year when Jeremy Clarkson punched somebody. Snickers came out with this very, very quickly and tweeted it at Jeremy Clarkson. And it's clever and it's good and it got retweeted and blah, blah, blah. I don't think anyone's ever really kind of looked at the metrics behind it and gone, did this actually sell more Snickers? But that, as I'll come on to, kind of doesn't really matter in the world of marketing and advertising, which is really weird. But yeah, this is where people are at the moment. They kind of think Agile is just about putting real-time content out on social media. And that kind of annoyed me, because I've been working in Agile for years, and Agile's fantastic and awesome in so many different ways, and has got so much to offer the marketing and kind of advertising industry that it really should move beyond this. So that's part of the motivation for writing the book and going, this is what it is, and this is how it could work, and all that sort of stuff. But I want to start by kind of looking at what marketing is, where marketing has come from, because there's kind of two things here. What are we changing, and should we change it? You can't just introduce Agile everywhere and have it work really, really well. You should only really introduce Agile in contexts where it's going to do good. So I want to kind of first of all look at what marketing is and where it came from. And that's really interesting, because actually marketing is a fairly new thing. People have been selling stuff for years, people have been advertising stuff for years, and that's fine. But the modern practice of marketing as we see it kind of started after the Second World War. And it's a bit of a theory I have that it started the same time as the modern concept of project management started, which again was a post-Second World War thing. Again, projects have been happening for years, but modern project management, as we currently understand it, all that waterfall stuff, really kicked in after the Second World War. So I wonder if the two of them kind of coming up together have really heavily influenced each other, and marketing, unwittingly or without sort of really too much thought, just kind of went, well, here's how you do stuff, because there's this new project management stuff, so we'll just adopt that. So marketing is inherently a very, very waterfall thing. And you see that in job ads like this and in career paths like this. Planning is a whole career path you can have within marketing. The idea of writing marketing plans isn't just a part of the process. There are entire departments that write plans. There are entire departments that hold people accountable to plans. Everything is planned up front. And of course, it's not like Agile bans planning. You can do planning in Agile, of course. But in marketing, it's really fetishized. It's really kind of a thing people really care about, being a marketing planner, planning everything up front, and then delivering it as expected. And you get this concept of the big idea as well, where basically marketers really pride themselves on having the big idea. And the big idea is when you start a marketing campaign, the client gives you the brief, and you come out with that big idea, the genius bit of creative, the penguin in the John Lewis ad, the whatever, daddy or chips, all that sort of stuff. That becomes your big idea, and you design that up front, and you kind of stick to it, even if it doesn't perform too well, even if it doesn't do great stuff, even if it sort of sinks without trace a bit. Having that big idea really, really matters. And again, it's an upfront design, an upfront planning thing that marketing has kind of really embedded itself with. And following on from that, it's a really, really heavily award-driven industry. Awards in marketing are huge. Everyone loves winning marketing awards. Those pencils there, the D&AD pencils, people go crazy over getting one of those things. It's the best thing ever to get this piece of wood. I don't get it myself, really. But the interesting thing that happens with the awards as well is they're very little based on metrics and very little based on performance. If you look at some of the assessment categories, some of the judging criteria for these awards, performance will be a part of it. You know, did it actually sell stuff? But another huge part of it was the creative genius. Was it beautiful? Was it impactful? Did it speak to you? Did it all this sort of fluffy stuff that's really unquantifiable? And for me, that is a real tension with some of the Agile stuff around like empirical process control, where you say, well, we'll do a bit of stuff, we'll inspect and adapt, we'll look at what happened with it, and then change course based on that. Marketing is much more about kind of design it all up front, and then doesn't really matter if it sells stuff, but you know, let's all win awards with it. There's also a page on LinkedIn that really bugs me called Brilliant Ads. This is just one bit of it. And quite regularly, they'll post up a brilliant ad, and everyone will reply and go, that's a brilliant ad. And not once have I seen anyone mention this ad sold something, this ad did something, this ad had these empirical results. It's just a brilliant ad. You know, it's beautiful, darling, fantastic. So yeah, it's a very sort of odd culture like that. And it comes back, I think, to this sort of thing, which is a very famous quote. And actually, some people attribute it to John Wanamaker, some people attribute it to Viscount Leverhulme. It could have been either of them, it could have been somebody else entirely. But it's a very fair comment. Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted, but I don't know which half. Back in the day, you couldn't have known this stuff. You couldn't do empirical process control because you were putting posters on billboards. Even putting stuff on TV is really kind of hard to measure. So you'd put a load of money into marketing and you'd probably get results out of it. Stuff would sell, your business would grow, all that great stuff would happen. But it kind of did this. It's kind of, you know, you plan it all nice and waterfall, and then there's sort of 3 question marks or a few question marks, and then profit. I don't know if you've seen the South Park episode with the underpant gnomes. It's a really great episode where there are these gnomes that go around stealing underpants because it's their business model. And their business model is steal underpants, question marks, profit. And they kind of go, well, what's the question marks? And they haven't really thought about that bit, but it's a great business. It's going to work really, really well. And weirdly, that is kind of what being around marketers and being in marketing is sometimes like. It's like, this is a beautiful ad. It's really impactful, fantastic, marvelous, lovely. We've planned all the media. Everything's got detailed plans. We've got all the documents done. That's great. Stuff goes out there. And stuff sells, so people are happy with it, but they don't really know what kind of happened in the middle. And that's kind of the current state of the marketing industry as I've kind of experienced it, as I've kind of seen it from the research I've done. But then why would Agile make a difference to this? Why would you try and put Agile into something where waterfall is happening? And no one is particularly screaming for it. No one is particularly going, this has been broken for 100 years and I can't believe no one's fixed it yet. You know, marketers are very happy in this world. I don't want to pull them out of a world they're actually quite comfortable in. And there's a few different reasons for that. The first one is this, basically, that there has been a massive proliferation in marketing channels over the last 10 or 15 years. So to look at some of the numbers, I was kind of pleased with this. 1624 was the first press ad in the UK. These are all UK stats. And 1867 was the first billboard roadside advertising thing in the UK. But nothing really changed. A new format came along. It's been around for a long time, and then people kind of worked out how it worked, which meant you can plan it much more up front because it becomes much more predictable, much more stable. But then suddenly all of these channels have emerged, and they're all very new, and they all do different things in different ways, and it's introduced a lot of complexity and uncertainty, and that's where Agile starts to work really well, when you've got complex, sort of uncertain environments. And there's other uncertainties emerge too. So say you're doing TV advertising. This, for years and years and years, was pretty much what people were doing when they were looking at your TV ads. You knew it was probably the family, probably in the living room, probably around a single TV, certain times of day. You could predict that kind of stuff and go, if we put an advert on between 7 and 8 p.m. on a Saturday, then we will know we'll probably hit this kind of audience. And it becomes very predictable, very stable, that kind of stuff. But now, thanks to the rise of mobile phones, you have no idea where people are consuming your content, your TV ads. They could be outdoors, they could have people other things competing for their attention, they could be on the bus into work with a screaming kid next to them. Even things like regular TV advertising, you now have catch-up TV. So when you put a program out and you put TV ads in that program, you don't know that that program will be watched at between 7 and 8 on a Saturday. It could be watched at 4 in the morning on Sunday when someone gets back half cut from the pub or whatever. There's this whole load of complexity that you can't really predict now when people are consuming your advertising in the way you used to be able to. And of course, people talk a lot about social media in advertising, and marketing. It's kind of overhyped. But it has done two really important things. The first one is if someone was really annoyed with your brand previously, check that's gone up, then they would tell you about it, they'd phone you up, they'd write you a letter, and it'd be a pretty low impact kind of thing. Now if someone criticises your brand or criticises what you're doing, that can be really, really public, really, really quickly. We kind of rely on third-party reviews now for assessing the products we buy. So that's got really complex, and the consumer suddenly got a lot more power. They can suddenly really harm your brand in a way they couldn't do before. A consumer would never buy a full page spread in the Sunday Times to say, I had a really bad customer service experience here. Now you can put 50 quid behind Twitter advertising if you're really annoyed and probably get 100 quid back in compensation and get 50 quid out of it for yourself. The other really interesting one with social media is this, that there used to be a thing where the marketing people would create the content, create the adverts, create the radio slots, whatever it was. They would then be planned in, they would buy the media slots, and those media slots would then push that content out to the people receiving it. So they would say, right, we'll film a TV ad, we'll go to the TV company, buy some slots in their advertising schedule, put those ads on, and then people will consume it. Social media now has really flipped that relationship on its head. So people who just have a simple free Twitter account can now do that role for you. They can now create your content, and they can also promote that content and push that content. And most of the time it doesn't really happen. It's important not to overstate this too much, but occasionally someone could create something around your brand and it really could go viral and reach huge numbers of people, and you kind of have no control over that anymore. Marketing used to be a really nice, safe, controlled thing that you were the ones that had the budget to put this out in front of people, and no one else could really compete with that, apart from maybe your actual direct competitors. Now anyone with a free internet account, free Twitter account, whatever, can start doing that for you, which really, really kind of flips that relationship on its head and makes it a lot more complex and uncertain. And the other one is data. And kind of, it's an interesting one with data, because people often go, it's so amazing, the internet gives us so much more insight and data now into human behaviour, into all that sort of stuff. If you've not read Dataclysm by the guy who was involved in OkCupid, it's a fascinating book about human behaviour from big data, basically. But I actually think this has made things far more complex, because previously marketing was kind of underpant gnomes, it had question marks, and they didn't worry too much about the data. Half the advertising was wasted, but don't know which half. Let's not worry about it too much. Now it's really gone in the other direction. So this is just a sample from one particular Facebook page that I run, and there's tons of data in that, almost more data than someone who knew what they were doing could possibly use. So actually I think that creates more complexity. As much as the truth probably is in there somewhere, the truth is now much harder to access, much more complex, much more uncertain in a way. And finally, the speed of all of this as well. So, was it last year? Where are we now, 2016? Yeah, early last year. Someone came up to me. I was introducing Agile in a marketing department, and someone came up to me and was like, "You heard of Meerkat?" I was like, "No, it's a small animal, isn't it? It sells insurance and stuff." And they were like, "No, it's an app for your phone, and you can live stream stuff, videos straight through to Twitter. How do we use it?" And I was like, "I don't know, I've only just heard what it is. I'll Google it for you and find out," because that's generally what as a consultant you do, you just Google stuff and tell the client what's on Google. So I had a look, and it looked interesting. I was like, let's not get too excited, it's only been out a week. But it's an interesting idea, let's try it. And then went to an event at the Roundhouse in London that Twitter were organising a few days later, and Twitter announced Periscope, which is the kind of blue one there, which was an app that did exactly the same thing as Meerkat. And suddenly Meerkat just sank without trace. It did this weird little thing where it burst onto the scene for a week and everyone talked about it, and then Twitter came out having bought Periscope, and Meerkat just sank. I think the guys who set up Meerkat lucked out on it. They floated just before that happened, so they actually got cash out of it. But yeah, so then I went back to work, and people were going, "Periscope, how do we use Periscope? That's what Twitter's backing, how do we use Periscope?" I was like, I really don't know, because I still don't know what Meerkat was, really. It's not on Google yet. So that fast pace is really undeniable now in marketing. New platforms emerge, new platforms die. Look at MySpace back in the mid-2000s. MySpace was huge. Rupert Murdoch spent hundreds of millions buying it. And then I think when MySpace finally sold, the shell that was left of it sold for like 30 million. I'm not even sure it's still up anymore. And I don't even know if it's, because I haven't even checked. That's, I don't know, weird really, because for one time it was everything, and then Facebook completely destroyed it, and something may come along and completely destroy Facebook, or Twitter, or whatever, or things will merge. It's a real kind of complex, fast-paced, uncertain environment, and that for me is why Agile is potentially really, really important in marketing, because you've got all the kind of classic symptoms of when you need agility, when you need to be able to respond really quickly, just do a small amount of stuff, iterate and adapt and evolve through it. So as much as marketers are happy in their world, I don't feel bad trying to pull them out of that world into a kind of more agile world, really. So is it happening? How would it happen? What would be involved in this really? And there's an interesting one from the Scrum Alliance. The Scrum Alliance run their State of Scrum survey every year, and it's great. I think it's actually live at the moment. If you've not taken the State of Scrum survey yet, do, because it's great and provides loads of really useful data. And there's all sorts of stuff in there around Scrum and Agile and so forth. But this one really interested me. It was around kind of outside of IT, which departmental areas run Scrum projects. So this isn't saying that all of this is kind of the number of places running non-IT Scrum projects. It's kind of for the set of people that responded to the survey and for that set that have people using Scrum outside of IT, which departments are using it. So it's potentially quite a sort of small subset. But the top one there was operations or production. Next one, research and development. The third one at 26% was sales and marketing. So it's happening, people are doing it. Whether they're doing it well, whether they're doing it properly, what version of Scrum they're using, not that Scrum has versions, but are they using Scrum Ban, are they using Kanban, do they know what Scrum means? I have no idea. But it was kind of there in the data, and I was like, that's really interesting. People are really doing this. It's all very well to go, yeah, there's a Oreo tweet that's about cookies and stuff, and that's agile marketing. Actually, some people are getting on with this and doing it. But it presents kind of a lot of challenges. The Agile manifesto obviously is great and it's pretty universally applicable to lots of different things, but it is fundamentally the manifesto for Agile software development. And it doesn't really mention, I think it mentions software twice in there as a word, but it is fundamentally about that and it's seen as that, and there's something really, really interesting around the way Agile has come through the world of software development and will be very, very much affected by it in various different ways. As much as it's a set of concepts and principles that can be applied to lots of different things, you could run Scrum in lots of different areas. There's a lot of sort of software baggage almost with it that I think becomes really interesting when you try and put it into marketing. And that's another reason I'm kind of interested in all this, because I think even just as a Scrum practitioner, or as an Agile practitioner, you learn a lot about those things by looking at them through a different lens, by looking at them from a different perspective, seeing, well, how would this work in marketing, and seeing some of the problems and the wrinkles and stuff when you kind of lay this over it, how does it land? And it's worth saying that there are some places where this is perfectly contiguous, where this perfectly works. So this was one in Bristol. I've been living in Bristol for 18, 19 years, I've only just left. And we've got Aardman in Bristol who do, Wallace and Gromit, and they did Morph back in the day, if you remember Morph and stuff like that. Shaun the Sheep. And Aardman are great, they're really into Bristol, and they did a thing where they put statues of different characters around the city every year. So one year it was all the Gromits. We had sort of 50 different Gromits scattered across Bristol, each decorated by a different artist. Another year it was Shaun the Sheep, and they put loads of Shaun the Sheeps around Bristol. But they did a thing where basically it was in conjunction with the Bristol Tourist Board, where you could get an app on your phone and go and track which ones you've been to, and it would give you rewards for sort of, can you get around all the ones in the city centre in the fastest time? Have you been to all the furthest outlying ones? All that sort of stuff. And it was a reasonably transparent way of getting you to go around Bristol more. It's a way of marketing Bristol. Loads of people came into Bristol for it. Loads of people used the app and recorded their scores and shared their scores on Facebook. It was fantastic kind of consumer-based viral marketing to a degree. But it was kind of a software development project. Okay, you've got the building of the Shaun the Sheep and you've got the painting of them. That kind of happened in a warehouse somewhere near the river in Bristol. But the app as the main thing was just a software development project. So it's kind of one of those places where marketing and software are pretty much the same thing. They're pretty much aligned. And that does happen more and more and more, where you get kind of, you could just run a Scrum team on that and they would build you an app and put it out there and test it and iterate it. And you'll get loads of data out of that. Another reason I think they were doing all these little challenges was to see how people would just track how people were using this and then optimize that for the next year and that sort of stuff. So very, very kind of agile in that sense. And those things don't really present a problem to agile marketing. Another one that's really interesting is what's called programmatic media buying. And if you haven't heard of programmatic media buying, you've completely seen it. Any website you go to and you see an advert on the website, if it's a major website now, in fact pretty much any site I should think, will have programmatic media buying on it. So it isn't like in the old days of marketing where you would buy half a page advert in the newspaper and you would have that in there and everyone who opened that page would potentially see that particular ad. Instead, you have these slots that are effectively blank, and when you load the page, it runs an auction within milliseconds of you loading that page, so you never notice it happen, the ad just appears, but it runs an auction based on your profile. And generally what happens is if you're using the internet with lots of tabs open in your browser and you've got Facebook open as one of your tabs, it'll scrape your Facebook data in, pull in exactly who you are, get your profile, pass that through to the advertising kind of auction and say, right, how much is everyone bidding for someone of this gender in this location, age between these things with these particular interest preferences. It runs the auction, the top bidder wins, and the ad comes back, all within milliseconds. So that's kind of, again, the way software has moved into the world of marketing, because you don't have media planners anymore. You don't do kind of media buying around programmatic, because previously you'd say, well, I want to reach people of a certain demographic, I'm going to buy half a page on this day in this newspaper. Now you just bang a load of numbers into an online auction system and it will serve you loads of impressions. But actually it's made things much more complex as well. You get awful situations where ads appear next to articles that are really inappropriate. They just get really contextually wrong and stuff, because there isn't that human element involved.
I can think of one, you know, like ads follow you around the brand. Sorry about a nasty anecdote here, but say you were going to have a child, and so you're looking at baby clothes, then you have a miscarriage. Those baby clothes adverts start following you around the place.
Do you see the one Amazon did?
It's dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which has the opposite effect.
Amazon had tried out social proofing for a while, and again, I think they're being quite agile with it because they dropped it quite quickly. But they did this thing where they were like, you're more likely to buy something if you see your friends have bought it already. So it's pulling in your friend data off Facebook and then showing you stuff your friends have bought. And one guy bought an engagement ring for his girlfriend, and then it played an advert to his girlfriend going, so-and-so, your bloke, has just bought this engagement ring. Do you want to buy one too? And he went, oh, I've not told her that yet. So effectively Amazon proposed to her on his behalf through programmatic media buying, which was awful. But again, I think that's an area where Agile could work really, really well, because you have tons of data, you can test stuff really quickly. Big marketing companies, big marketing organizations tend not to be very good at this, but you could have an idea on the bus in the morning, put out some ads very quickly, and by 9:30 in the morning know which ad was working better or if this campaign was even worth carrying on with. And then by 10 o'clock, by the time you're getting your first coffee in the morning, you've run an entire campaign, tested an entire campaign, and ditched an entire campaign, which is great in a way you could never do with press advertising, because even if you bought a slot in the paper the next day and didn't get data till the day after, that's still 48 hours. It's massively speeded up. But there are some areas where this really doesn't match at all. Fundamentally, there's that thing in Agile where people get a bit obsessed about documentation and going, we're not producing documentation here, we're interested in working software, and that's great. But sometimes, you say you prioritize working software over comprehensive documentation. Sometimes marketing is comprehensive documentation. What marketers do is produce leaflets, is produce posters, is produce newspaper ads. Fundamentally, their output isn't a working thing, it's just kind of documentation. And you get an interesting challenge here then between the two different worlds, the two different mindsets. And I see this kind of quite a lot in organizations where the marketing department has suddenly caught on to the internet and that it's a thing and there's a website and we ought to care about it a bit. So they turn up in front of a bunch of devs and a bunch of people who've been building the website for years and looking after it and go, right, we're marketing, we need to be in charge of this, we need to put our brand identity across it, we need to sign off all your copy, we need to do all this sort of stuff. And the web people kind of go, understandably, well, no, we've built this for years, and who are you, and what are you doing, and we're already in charge of this. So who owns that? Who actually owns the particular marketing there? You've got this real tension between people who've been very much in this old mindset and people who are very much in the kind of Agile, code-based mindset. How do you get them working together? And again, that's where Agile, I think, works really well in terms of creating cross-functional teams. Should you be saying we have a marketing department and we have a software department, or should you just be splitting out your marketing department and embedding them all individually, or training people, getting marketing to become facilitators of this, train people in brand guidelines. What I generally find though is when that happens, the people who've been trained in the brand guidelines never talk to marketing again because the training was so bad and it was so awful, it was so fluffy and nonsense and non-empirical and non-black and white that they'll just go, yeah, we've had the training and now we're going to do this. And then marketing get really upset that something else is happening and it's all of brand guidelines. But there's a real sort of battle lines drawn between this sort of stuff, which is really interesting. Now marketers are beginning to realise that the internet is a thing, really. And another one that's a problem is kind of this. It's the John Lewis Christmas ad. It's probably the highlight of any marketer's year is the John Lewis Christmas ad. What are John Lewis going to do as their ad? And you see it with the budgets, you see when it's put on Saturday night prime time, which is really interesting because marketers still think that matters. The fact that the John Lewis ad always premieres in the evening at a weekend, just like it would have done in the 1960s and 1970s, doesn't matter anymore, really. but they kind of really care about it. But the first principle of the Agile Manifesto is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And if you just chop off the valuable software bit of that for a minute and focus on the early and continuous delivery, how do you do early and continuous delivery on a Christmas campaign? Because we get annoyed enough that Christmas stuff ends up in the shops in July, August kind of thing. If you're doing early delivery of a Christmas campaign, you start delivering your Christmas campaign in January and then deliver it every 2 weeks from then on all throughout the year. And it's not a Christmas campaign then, that's just a kind of always on, as they call it, campaign. So yeah, it doesn't really work in that sense. And you get stuff like this in software. You get software that has dates, it has launch dates, it has all that sort of stuff. But marketing, to my mind, sometimes has much more reliance on dates. A Christmas campaign only happens at Christmas. If your dates slip on a Christmas campaign and it goes live in January, it's completely pointless and you look bizarre and you wouldn't even put it live. You just pulp the whole thing. So yeah, that kind of creates an issue with it. Yeah, the other bit I had on that was a conversation I was having with a developer one time, very kind of black and white developer in that great way developers can be. And I was talking about TV and doing TV advertising. And he was saying basically we don't get a lot of data back from it. We put all this stuff out, question marks, profit. And he just looked at me and went, well, why are you doing TV advertising then? And I was like, I don't know. Really? Why are we doing it? And we've got in this mindset of doing that kind of stuff. But what, to my mind, Agile does then is flip that on its head and say, do you then reinvent the way you do TV advertising? Rather than having a big idea, planning it all up front, buying the media slots, all that sort of stuff, do you actually go, we're going to create some small little YouTube videos, put them on YouTube, see which one performs the best. The ones that perform the best we'll make some more of. And then if those keep on going really, really well, maybe we'll then take them to TV to increase the reach of them. But actually, fundamentally, let's not go big at the start, let's go small and work our way up. And you see some advertisers starting to do that. But the interesting thing that's happening, I think, is that the advertisers who are doing that are very often just staying in YouTube. They're looking at the results they're getting out of YouTube, they're looking at the results they're getting out of all this kind of internet-y, technology, software-y stuff, and going, this is far better than TV. We're getting much better reach, much better targeting, all that stuff, and not going into TV at all. So there's a lot of interesting stuff Agile throws up around some of these old channels. Some of these old channels that do need upfront planning, that do need upfront media buying, that do have really hard fixed dates that cannot move. You can't slip Christmas by 2 weeks just because you've missed a sprint goal or whatever. One bit where it really works as well is what's called content marketing. And content marketing is really big at the moment, although they've already gone through a kind of curve of it where people are now going, well, content marketing is just so big, it's just marketing. It's a whole load of debate on LinkedIn, you get into around it. And basically the idea is that content marketing is rather than pushing you something and going, buy this product, it gives you useful and valuable content around the product that then changes your behavior towards helping the product sell more stuff. And one really early example of it is the Michelin Guide. If you know the Michelin Guide, which is a guide of restaurants, originally in France, the best restaurants, and then I think it's across the world now. You get one for the UK and one for London, stuff like that. The Michelin Guide was originally content marketing because Michelin were a tyre company, and still kind of are a tyre company. And the problem they had was they created tyres that were really, really good and didn't wear out as quickly. And that's really bad from a sales and marketing point of view because you don't sell as much. You sold someone a pair of tyres and they go, great, we don't have to buy your tyres as regularly. And they've kind of shot themselves in the foot. So they were like, well, how do we get people to buy more tyres? The way you get them to buy more tyres is to get them to drive more, to wear those tyres out more quickly. And the way they thought they would get French people to drive more is by making a restaurant guide and putting lots of remote restaurants in it in the countryside that you had to drive out to. And that's how they ended up being a restaurant guide company as well, which is really random. But here, I think Agile works really well, and that concept of the user story is fantastic for content marketing as I want to, so I can, because that's what content marketing is all about. As someone who's just bought a set of tyres, I want to find out how I can make best use of my car so I can enjoy some great food. Rubbish user story, but I'm generally rubbish at user stories when I'm just saying off the top of my head. But yeah, it works really, really well, and it starts to make marketing much more personal and much more targeted, which again fits in with this internet stuff where you can target stuff right down to a really fine-grained level. I was toying with the idea earlier of putting some Twitter advertising on and just targeting at people interested in Agile in Falmouth right now, which pretty much would have just been everyone here, and just seeing what that did and getting a data set out of that. But you can get down to that level of personalization. So when you've got a user story that you use to create your content, and then you can do all the fascinating personalization you can do with digital marketing, then Agile and marketing start to play really nicely together. So yeah, it works really well in stuff like content marketing, social media, stuff like that. Not so sure it works well in TV and what have you. But there are some real cultural issues with this. I'm not working around marketers anymore. I've kind of moved on from that. But yeah, I think they won't mind me sort of pointing some of this stuff out. And the first one is failure. Failure is really great in Agile. You know, stuff fails. That's really exciting. We've learned a lot from that. Let's fail as often as we can so we stop failing as much, so we learn as much as we possibly can. Marketers don't fail. Failure is not something they ever do. It's kind of like if you ever watch a poker tournament on TV, and the people who've been playing poker for 24, 48 hours, they're playing for big money, like $1 million check or something. When they award the check at the end to the winner goes up and is just completely unhappy, just completely whatever, takes the check, walks off, because they spent days not making any facial expressions at all. They've got complete poker face. So even though they're probably ecstatic, they've just made $1 million, you'd never see it from their face. And the same thing, I think, happens with marketers. They're fundamentally people who tell good stories about stuff. They never talk about the defects in products. They never talk about things going wrong. Everything's always the best thing ever, the newest thing ever, the most exciting thing ever. And when that's your job, it just becomes pervasive into your mindset and your way of life. So if you say to a marketer what's failed, they'll go nothing, because everything's brilliant, it's fantastic, it's marvelous. The closest I got to getting one person to admit failure was getting them to say there's room for improvement, which even in and of itself is a positive thing. So yeah, it's really, really difficult to get them to talk about failure. It's almost culturally kind of alien to them in a way. And the other one that's interesting is this. And these are all logos for big advertising marketing agencies. And can anyone see what's the common theme between all of them? There's one thing that's common between all these different logos.
The initials.
Nearly.
Lettering.
Initials of?
The people, the owners of the company.
Yeah, they're all people's initials. And I've actually got some of them written down. So RKCRYNR is Rainey, Kelly, Campbell, Wolf, Young and Rubicam. And if you go to a meeting with them, I've met Mark Wolf a few times, if you go to a meeting with them, they do introduce themselves as Rainey, Kelly, Campbell, Wolf, Young and Rubicam. And you're like, we all call you Rainies. Can you not just call yourself Rainies?
60s band.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Mary Monk. Yeah, Pew Pew, Barley McGrew. It really is like that. Saatchi and Saatchi was a great one, because Saatchi and Saatchi were set up by the Saatchi brothers, and then I think in 1995 the Saatchi brothers got forced out of Saatchi and Saatchi is still going, it just doesn't have the Saatchis in it. So they went off and set up M&C Saatchi, Morris and Charles Saatchi. They still kept their name, they kind of restarted the thing, it still had to be about their name. And my favourite is the AMVBBDO, which is Abbott, Mead, Vickers, Batten, Barton, Durstein and Osborne. So it's all these people's names. And the interesting stuff you see with this is that the new digital marketing agencies don't do this. They have names that are real names, or just random words sometimes and stuff. But it's all the really old ones that are all a conglomerate of people's names. And quite often, I think Rainey, Kelly, Campbell, Wolf was set up by the four of them. Mark Wolf's the only one left there now. And then Young and Rubicam bought them, but they wouldn't give up the Rainey, Kelly, Campbell, Wolf, so they had to merge the two together. And then they're still part of some bigger group as well. And that, for me, says volumes about what an opinion-based industry this is, that people have made an entire career out of being the person that made the right call about that one great campaign. And if they make a series of right calls, then they get to put their letters into an agency's name and everyone loves them and so forth. But I'm not entirely convinced that all of those right calls are due to those people's genius, or they've just been lucky. They've just made the right calls now and again. Statistically, some will do well, some will do badly. But yeah, it's a really, really opinion-based kind of industry, and that's ingrained even into the way the agencies themselves are founded, the way the agencies are set up. Working with an agency one time, quite a big agency, I was speaking to them and go, can you send me that stuff? We need to get that stuff over so the team here can work on it. And they went, oh no, our director hasn't signed it off yet. And we were like, wait, we're the customer, you're the provider, why are you signing off our stuff? Why is your director signing off we sign off our stuff, don't we? But they had this mindset that the senior person in the agency had to sign anything off before it left the door of the agency. We're like, no, just show it to us. Just show us early. If it sucks, fine, we'll work on it together iteratively, that's fine. Yeah, it's a real kind of hierarchy, command control thing. And another interesting thing you get is around A/B tests, and this actually happened to me where I started introducing the idea of A/B tests into a marketing department I was doing kind of agile transformation in, and said rather than just going, here's a bunch of creative, what does the highest paid person in the room like the most, and let's go with that, which is what they'd always done. I was like, why don't we put a couple of them out there and test them very quickly, see which one works, and then do more of the one that works. And people kind of smiled politely and went, sounds yeah, vaguely plausible. So I kind of put some stuff together, and they were like, well, you've got to get it signed off. You've got to get it signed off by the most senior person in the room. So I took it to them to get signed off and said, here's the A/B test, and what do you think? And they went, well, the answer's A. I said, no, it's an A/B test. Can you sign off the fact it's an A/B test? And they went, well, what is an A/B? So I explained what an A/B test was. And they went, well, why are you testing? Because the answer's A. I was like, no, the answer might be A or it might be B. We don't know yet. And they just couldn't get their head around that because it has always been their job to say what the answer was. And when you start going, we can get loads of data back now, they were kind of unsettled by all of that. Previously, they'd lived in a world of question marks where their opinion was the closest anyone got to an answer because it was just question marks and then profit. Now I could go, we're going to test this and we can see if you're right or you're wrong. I got someone really upset me once where I actually said, okay, I'll have a bet with you. I reckon this isn't going to work. You reckon it is going to work. Let's test them both, see what happens. I did a full statistical analysis, Pearson's correlation, blah, blah, on the whole thing, and basically showed that what I thought would work had worked. But that was kind of lucky on my part, really. And they got really upset and they're like, I don't want anyone to see this. And I was like, why not? We've got some great data we can do something with. And they're like, no, because I was wrong and I can't be wrong. And I was like, oh, but it's such a shame. So they pulped. Does that?
Don't have an opinion then.
No, exactly.
So which was it, A or B? Did you find out?
Do you know, I honestly can't remember. I should try and see if I've got that somewhere and find which one it was. I think because it was only the one test, I think at that point I went, there's other things we can be doing than starting to get people's heads around this, unfortunately. But it was a really interesting thing that they just couldn't get their head around an A/B test at all. And the other one that happens is around kind of co-location. And this is a really, really big thing, especially in large organizations with very big advertising budgets, very big marketing budgets. Lots and lots of marketing is outsourced to large agencies. There's agencies with people's names above the doors and so forth. And that, to my mind, creates real problems for agility in that you kind of haven't got one team working here. You haven't got one cross-functional team working. You've actually got a customer and a kind of provider, and there's a lot of tension between them. They've both got their senior people who both have their own opinions. They're not co-located. They're based all over the shop. You don't meet that often. They can move people around your account without you really knowing about it. And it really hinders forming a really nice cross-functional, high-performing team that you kind of need for agility. But the interesting thing there is that I'm kind of not as convinced these days by the idea of, everyone must be co-located. The Agile manifesto was written in 2001. Technology has come on a long way since then. We have Skype, we have video conferencing, we have all that sort of stuff. There are ways you can kind of make co-location, non-co-location better than it was back in 2001. But the really bigger one, to my mind, for agility with marketers is actually availability. For some reason, marketers have lots of meetings, loads and loads of meetings. Developers, in my experience, tend to sit there with each other and write code or do pair programming or talk to each other or have stand-ups or whatever. Marketers, if you get an office full of marketers, they just disappear. They run away all over the shop. And you go, where were you? I was meeting the client, then we had a meeting here. Then they go and look at billboards. You put a billboard poster up and they have to fly to the other end of the country to go and look at a billboard and go, yeah, it's a billboard, yeah. It's got the advert on that we put on it. Great, let's fly back. It's just bizarre. So they do that, and I did that a lot. I was out selling software originally. My introduction to Agile was one day being told I'm a product owner, and I didn't know what that meant. So I immediately went out of the office for 48 hours to go meet clients, and came back to a very angry development team going, we had questions for you, where were you? And I was like, I'm meeting clients, that's what I do. They're like, we're not if you're a product owner, and that's how I learned. But yeah, it's a bigger issue, I think, both around the co-location thing, but also the availability. Marketers just generally aren't as available as other kinds of people. Whether it's a cultural thing, whether it's to do with the sort of work they do, I'm not entirely sure. Another really big one is the customer. And Agile is all about customer focus, delivering value to the customer, all that sort of stuff. But who is the customer, first of all, in marketing? Generally with software, you do get problems like this, but generally in software, the customer is the end user, is the person using it. You're interested in their feedback and their opinion. But say you're marketing kids' toys, is the customer the kid who is the end user of the thing you're marketing, or is it the parent who's actually going to do the buying? There's two different customers kind of going on here. If you're selling flowers, is the customer the upset woman who receives them, or the embarrassed boyfriend who buys them on the train station on the way back after a large argument? All these kind of different life scenarios that happen. Who are you really targeting? But more fundamentally, if you're interested in customer collaboration, why would customers collaborate with you over marketing? If you're building software, customers will collaborate with you because they're going to be using the software, and if the software sucks, that's going to make their life more difficult. Why would someone go, I really want to help you sell me more stuff. I really want you to help, help you take more money off me. And quite often, marketers don't have people's best interests at heart. They have things to sell. You know, look at tobacco advertising, for example. I don't think there's any way you could spin tobacco advertising as something that had the customer's interest at heart. It could not have been done in a kind of an agile way. And to my mind, that's a really interesting and exciting part of introducing agile into marketing, that it starts to question what you should and shouldn't market, what you should and shouldn't get involved in. And actually servant leadership that's in agile touches on some of this and moral dimension too. And I think every marketer has always kind of had red lines in the sand. You know, I will market these things, I will not market these things. I will not work for alcohol, tobacco or firearms or whatever. Some people will market those things. But if you're doing a sort of agile approach to this and you're interested in putting the customer first, then at the same time you've got to kind of wonder about what you're actually marketing. What's the end result of your marketing? Should your marketing only do good? And that to me is just a huge area that I've not really even got into too much yet, but is potentially another really interesting facet of how, if we introduce agile into marketing, it could really change the entire industry. So where next? I don't know, really. I wrote a book and I deliberately called it The Incomplete Guide, because I kind of believe there couldn't be a complete guide to agile marketing, because by definition it could never be complete. And it's version 1.0.0, so I do intend to update it at some point. But what I'm really interested in is actually finding examples of where this worked. This came out of very academic masters that I kind of had to do a lot of academic stuff with, which was a huge privilege and a huge opportunity on my part to do lots of reading around this. But it is a bit academic in some senses. I'm really interested to hear from people who have been doing this, who've seen this happen in practice, especially at larger scale, and places where it's genuinely happened in a real way, not in a, yeah, we all stand up around some post-it notes, agile, you know, where it's actually being kind of thought through and it's working and stuff. And I know some small digital agencies are doing this just by dint of being small digital agencies. They kind of inherently do that stuff when you're only 5 people working in a room. You always get a bit agile with that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think this is the theory of it. It now needs to be taken into the practice. And as I say, there are a bunch of books here that I really want to get rid of. So if anyone wants any of them for yourself or any marketers you think might be interested, that'd be fantastic. And if you want to give me any feedback on it too, obviously you can download the book for free as well. If you're into digital copies of the book, you can download it for free. Just gave it away. And there's a whole bunch of videos as well I do if you go to bunnypit.co.uk/videos. But yeah, any feedback on it of real life examples would be really, really interesting, because I think this isn't something I can fix, something I can solve. I can ask a load of questions, but actually it's how this plays out in reality that's kind of the next step of this and the most interesting part of it. So I've got 3 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions?
I mean, do you think they're ultimately dead, those big old marketing companies, and what will happen is the digital agencies?
I think so. Sorry, yes. So are the big old marketing agencies dead and will the little agencies kind of take them over? I think 2 things will happen. One is there is a thing still that if you throw enough money at it, you'll get results out of it. And these big old places do still have money. Large organisations still have so much cash, they can throw a lot of money out of it, into it, question marks, and profit will still come out at the end of it somehow. And the other thing they're doing is they buy up a lot of these little agencies. So, you know, little agency starts up. I know when I was working with some friends and I set up a little startup back in the early sort of mid-2000s, within a year we had people offering to buy us. And we went, no, actually they still haven't sold to this day. I'm not there anymore, but still haven't sold to this day. But yeah, it's much easier. But generally what happens is they buy them and then just destroy them. Just come in and go, where are your plans, where are your documents, where's your beauty and your creativity? And they go, we've got a load of A/B tests. And they go, no idea what that is, throw those away, and we want some plans. And then everyone walks out and it kind of dies. So I think slowly it will change, but I couldn't immediately say this is just going to change this overnight. I think when you've got a lot of money, that will be a lot of inertia there, a lot of practice there, a lot of cultural stuff there as well in the marketing industry itself. If I turn up and go, we need to get rid of all of these awards, I'm not going to win any friends at all. People love those award ceremonies. They really matter to them. Getting that pencil is the high point of your career. So yeah, if someone turns up taking that away, they're not going to listen.
Do you actually think there is a future for marketing, given how it's being put into consumers' hands? With like the reviews on Amazon type thing, that's all consumer type of thing.
Well, it isn't. That's the thing. Since about 2006, a lot of it's fake. There's no such thing as viral anymore. Viral only really happen, I think very, very, very occasionally, once a year, you'll get something actually going viral in a real sense. Viral used to work when the internet was tiny, and you put something on the internet and pretty much everyone would see it. I know someone who once downloaded the internet onto his hard disk back in like I think it was the early 90s. He just made a copy of it locally. But now it's just got too big. So what happens is these marketing agencies set up fake accounts all over the internet that then do the virality. There was a great one where Jaffa Cakes got into an argument on Facebook with some other big brands, and it went all over the marketing web, oh, fantastic brand endorsement, blah, blah, lots of interactivity. And I met the guy who was all of those brands at the same time. He had an argument with himself between Jaffa Cakes and Sainsbury's and everyone else. He ran all of those accounts. So it was completely fake. And a lot of this customer sentiment online, a lot of these reviews online, a lot of the pushing of content online is all people paid to do that in all sorts of ways, and has been for years. I've not been involved in that now for a few years. It would have moved on so much more since even when I was involved in it. So yeah, I forget your original question, I'm afraid, but the initial bit about...
Is marketing going to exist in the future?
Yes, I think it will. It will just go very underground and you will notice it less and less and less. The amount of data that's scraped off your computer every time you get a programmatic display ad is terrifying if you actually knew about how much you can be targeted through that
So
stuff.
it'll be more, less about averting manipulation, and it will be more
Yeah.
subverting manipulation.
Yeah, quite Nazi, you know. Yeah.
Even with the internet thing, you've still got that initial brand promotion to get it out there in the first place. So, you know, a lot of Apple users do a lot of Apple's marketing for them. So
Yeah.
on about how much.
But again, Apple thought that through. So they made the unboxing so beautiful and so slow that people recorded YouTube videos about it. And I think those YouTube videos originally were Apple themselves filming them and making out a few people. But yeah. Sorry, just know you got a question. Oh, sorry, yes. So,
Yeah, so what I said was, is you've always got the initial brand promotion, right? You've got to get your brand out there in the first place, haven't you? If the big marketing departments aren't relevant afterwards, and your users do it themselves over Twitter, you've still got to get that big brand out. So marketing can't really die, can it? Because you've got to get that push.
yeah, do you need the initial marketing band, the initial push behind it? And you do and you don't, but a lot of stuff gets launched very subtly now. Do you remember that video of that girl dancing in Bristol to Because I'm Happy, that song that came out about a year or two ago? Complete marketing thing. It went around the internet as all girls really happy dancing in Bristol. I lived in Bristol and saw where it was and was like, that's weird, no one would ever do that around there. And actually it turned out it's someone I knew had filmed the video. But it went all over the internet for a couple of weeks and then launched the song that way, and the song went to #1 and everyone was like, oh, it started because that girl was dancing to an orbit of Northern Soul that she found on the internet. It's rubbish. Yeah. I think we might be timing out. If anyone does have other questions or wants a book, do feel free to come up. I'm happy to loiter around, etc. But otherwise, thanks a lot for listening.